Are we live, Julio? We're
Yes,
good.
we are.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm here with Steph Beischleg, our community manager. Did I pronounce that?
Yeah,
Really?
absolutely.
That is the best last name ever. Beischleg. I think that's awesome. Sounds like a beer. You should have your own beer brand.
I need
beer.
one. Yeah, on my desk.
Beischleg Brewery. And I'm also here with my good friend Julie Lee, who's coming all the way from Nova Scotia to join us. This is kind of funny because this was totally random, and because somebody mentioned something about an article that was published, and I thought, oh, I really want to shed some more light on this, and I knew Julie would too. So Julie is literally in her car right now in somewhere in the Nova Scotia Valley, and but thanks so much for joining us, Julie. So what I want to do is I just want to have a little bit of a say, and then I want to hear everything that Julie has to say on this as well. Does that sound like a deal? Because I want to talk about fish oils, plant oils, and whether or not dogs can really digest and use them or not. And I was asked, like yesterday on the Elite page, I was asked a really, really good question. And I honestly think that the answer is important enough to jump on a quick Facebook Live here and share it with you guys. So thanks for indulging us. But recently, a holistic vet published an article saying that dogs can't convert plant-based alpha-linolenic acid, which is an omega-3 fat. She said that dogs can't convert it to EPA and DHA, and she said that dogs don't have the enzymes to do this, so they really shouldn't get plant oil. They should get fish oil, or in this case, krill oil instead, because it comes complete with EPA and DHA, whereas plant oils only have the ALA, which is the precursor. And can you pull that slide up? Because I just kind of want to show what she said there.
So,
Beischleg.
I can.
Really? Can you? Are you sure you
can?
Okay. Maybe we don't need to say it.
Give me a hand.
Okay. Never mind. Okay. So listen. EPA and DHA, these are fatty acids, and they're the more bioavailable forms of ALA, or alpha-linolenic acid, which is one of the main omega-3 fatty acids. Now, there it is.
Hey.
Except, let's do this because there we go. Okay, so thanks, man. So anyway, that's what they said. Now, ALA is found in grass-fed animals and also in plant oils and fish oils. The thing about plant oils is that they contain ALA, which is a precursor of, can you switch to the next slide for me there so people can see? So they contain ALA, and ALA is a precursor of EPA and DHA, but plant oils don't contain the EPA and DHA. But fish oils do contain EPA and DHA, and I hope you follow there. Now, EPA is a fatty acid that's really important to health. It competes with the really inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, and it competes for receptor sites and decreases inflammation in the body, and that's really, really important because most chronic diseases are chronic inflammation. Now, DHA, it makes really healthy cell membranes, especially in the nerve cells. So it's especially good for brain and eye health. So in this study here, if you can switch to the next slide there, and this is these are the studies that this vet used. And researchers here compared the plant-based ALA to the ALA from fish oil, which also contains the EPA and DHA. And what they did was they looked at the inflammatory markers in both groups of dogs. And they found that the dogs eating the fish oil, it had a much bigger impact on inflammatory markers in those dogs. And they found that dogs can convert ALA to EPA, but just a small amount, like anywhere from 1% to 9%. And they also produced a precursor for DHA, which is called DPA, but really not all that much DHA at all. Now, what I want to say is this is a long ways from saying that dogs don't have the enzymes that they need to convert ALA to EPA, because the dogs did convert it. If you look at that study, they did convert the ALA. the researchers just thought they didn't convert enough. They saw bigger changes in the inflammatory markers, and the dog's hair coat condition was much better if the dogs were fed the fish oil that contained not just the ALA, but also the EPA and the DHA. So I want to be clear on this point first. Dogs clearly do have the enzymes they need to convert ALL to EPA and to a DHA precursor, because as the scientists said themselves, they just don't know if the amount that the dogs produce is enough to control inflammation. But they did convert it. Maybe not enough, but they converted it. But here's the thing about nutrition and why we shouldn't make blank statements like dogs don't have the enzymes to convert ALA to EPA. Because what we know about nutrition is a lot less than, what we don't know. And that's because it's really hard to make studies that really measure what we want them to. And this study here is an example. And what you need to know about these studies done on the dogs and their ALA was that these dogs were fed kibble. And kibble is really super high in inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids. So the dogs were already dealing with too much inflammation, and it's probably true that in that case they couldn't manufacture enough EPA to curb that much inflammation. And that's because both omega-6 and omega-3 fats compete for the same receptor sites. And if there's too much omega-6 in the diet, you'll never be able to get enough omega-3 in there to compete with it. So the problem might not be that they couldn't manufacture enough EPA. The problem could be that they couldn't make enough EPA to make up for the omega-6 orgy in their kibble diet. Do you understand the difference? And research actually shows that this is the case because diets that are high in linoleic acid, which is a primary omega-6 fatty acids, these diets can decrease the ALA conversion by as much as 40%. And trans fats, which are the result of high temperature cooking, can also reduce the conversion of ALA to EPA. I hope that makes sense. And big intakes of EPA and DHA, like you would get in fish oil, can decrease the conversion rate of ALA to EPA. So if you're giving your dog a lot of fish oil, you could be limiting his ability to convert ALA into EPA and DHA. That's right. His body will rely on that supply and he'll stop trying to convert it. But here's the one other thing that I want to talk about really, really quick, and then we'll get to Julie. These studies that she quoted are more than a decade old, and that's relevant because that was before scientists really started looking at the microbiome and how it impacts immunity, inflammation, and nutrition. Now, the microbiome is made up of populations of bacteria and microorganisms that live on and in your dog. And the important microbiome that I want to talk about is the one that lives in your dog's gut. Now, the bacteria there outnumber your dog's own cells by about 10 to 1. And these friendly, happy little bacteria populations have a mutually beneficial relationship with your dog. They eat what your dog eats. And when they do, they poop out little metabolites that can talk directly with your dog's brain. They can help control his immune system and chronic inflammation. They can provide a lot of his vitamins and really important short-chain fatty acids that also help control inflammation. Plus, they compete with pathogenic bacteria like E. coli, Salmonella, and Bordetella, and they crowd these bacteria out because their metabolites are toxic. So that's not a good thing. But most importantly, these bacteria, their metabolites can also produce enzymes. Now, remember when I said those bacteria eat what your dog eats? New research shows that these bacteria produce metabolites that can stimulate the conversion of ALA to EPA and DHA, and that's really good news. But if your dog eats a lot of starch, and if he's eating kibble, he'll be eating a lot of starch. So if your dog eats a lot of starch, it's going to feed the bacteria that like to eat starch. And those bacteria will start to grow out of control, and they'll compete with the bacteria that like to eat fats like ALA, and then there's fewer of those bacteria to help convert the ALA to EPA and DHA. Now, I really want to show you this slide really, really quickly. Now, this is preliminary data, and it's from a study that hasn't been published yet. I need to stress that, but it's an emerging story. And I asked doctors Richard Patton and Holly Gans, both PhD vets and researchers, I asked them for these preliminary results of their study, and they agreed to share them with us. Yay! So in this study, what they did was they fed dogs kibble, and they took fecal samples, and they examined the bacteria in their feces. And then what they did, they took half of the dogs that were eating kibble and they put them on a freeze-dried raw food for 2 months, and they left the other half on the kibble diet. And then what they did was they compared the fecal samples from both groups of dogs that were eating kibble to the dogs that were switched to the freeze-dried raw. And what you'll see there is the bacteria populations from the dogs in eating the kibble are in blue, and the bacteria population from the raw-fed dogs are in green. And what you can see is that bacteria populations are vastly different. The populations of bacteria shifted just a huge amount just based on what they were feeding the dogs. So if the dog eats a diet that's high in starch, then the starch-eating bacteria species will grow. And if the diet is high in fat, then the fat-eating species will grow. So why am I telling you all of this? Why have I gathered you all here to go through this? That's because nutrition isn't black and white. First off, dogs most definitely do have the enzymes to convert ALA to EPA because they do convert it. But feeding an omega-6 rich diet like kibble or any other type of starch or sweet potato, that seems to suppress those enzymes by up to 40%. And adding EPA and DHA to the diet also suppresses those enzymes. So if you're feeding fish oil, your dog will be less and less able to convert ALA to EPA. And a starch-rich diet might also reduce the number of bacteria populations that can help convert ALA to EPA and ultimately DHA. So quickly, what's the answer here? Don't feed your dog an unnatural diet like kibble. Dogs aren't designed to deal with a diet that's 30% starch or more and a diet that's high in omega-6 fatty acids. They can't do it, and it changes their bacteria populations and the metabolites that they produce, as well as the enzymes that they produce, and it changes the enzyme activity in your dog. So if you're going to feed your kibble, then I guess you should probably just slather fish oil all over it. But I suspect if you're still watching this, then you really want to do better for your dog. So the best way that I think you can do this is to make sure there's a balance between the inflammatory omega-6 fats and the anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats. And the best way to do that is to feed them the right foods in the right amounts. And that means little to no starch, a good amount of protein, and about 10 to no more than 20% fat. So it's not as simple as dogs have to eat fish oil or krill oil because they don't have the enzymes to convert ALA to EPA and DHA. Nutrition, trust me, is never that easy. And that's why it's always best to stick to what Mother Nature made for your dog to eat, which is healthy, raw, whole foods. And I personally don't think fish oil is healthy. It's certainly not raw. It's processed and heated, and it's not a whole food. It's stripped of its minerals and other nutrients, and I don't think it belongs in the dog's diet. So now that I've hopefully convinced you that the raw-fed dog doesn't need fish oil, as I said, I brought my good friend Julianne Lee, who's waiting patiently at the side of the road in her car. Julie's the founder of Adored Beast Apothecary, and I'd really like to get, Julie, I'd love to get your take on this and talk a little about plant oils like hemp seed oil and whether and how dogs can extract the fatty acids that they need from them.
Well, I think you said a lot, and meaning like I think you covered a lot of the basis, right? Which is, first of all, I think that there is no black and white. I think that there's so many people in the world who in their own lives don't eat that healthy, and do we have to add things to the diets of people that are eating like that, or animals that are eating like that? I think we do, but the study that you're showing is, I think it's accurate, but it's really accurate, but it's accurate in that realm, right? So exactly like you said, it's been something that I've been looking at for a long time, and I have to be honest about it. It's more about my ethical devotion, or my way of always looking at, okay, well, why? So when you look at, do they convert, don't they convert, it's to me, it doesn't make sense. So I'm not saying it's not accurate, and everything that you said is completely 1,000% accurate. The research is accurate. What the holistic vet said is accurate. But I'm such a freak when it comes to problem solving, and not going, okay, this is what we're seeing, and this is what science is saying, and this is what science is doing. Because I'm a total science nerd, but my friends always laugh when I say science changes their mind like I change my underwear. It's like it's constantly evolving, right? It's constantly changing. What I learned from a science-based perspective when I was at school and university, it's not even accurate at all right now.
Absolutely.
So that's a good thing. But it's also a good thing that we all have our opinions, because our opinions also affect the diversity of our population, right? So there are going to be people that are going to go and buy, no name brand foods, and those dogs probably will do better. And this is like hard for me to even say, with certain kinds of fish oil. I mean, still, ideally, I would rather them to have real fish, because of the fear of people not being able to go out and buy high quality krill oil, right? Like, what if they can't? So then they just go and buy really terrible salmon oil that is rancid. And so for me, it's a much bigger picture, right? But when you come down to it, it's like, why don't they? Like, what about this study? What about what we're seeing out there? What's the underlying reason? And then the kind of nerdy way that I look at the world, and I look at formulating, and I look at healing, is on a much bigger picture. So for me, there's a few problems. One is dogs, like animals, which are like the love of my life, and I've devoted my whole life to. But those animals don't stop there, and those animals are directly also in the ocean, like orcas, like killer whales. And we have a serious, serious problem with our fish depletion, and fish oil is one of those reasons why. And I have a very close friend that is a salmon biologist, and he was super straight with me. He said, if we don't decide something soon, we will not have any orcas. In 10 years, we will not have killer whales. So it's a bigger problem that I'm hoping is going to create even another solution. So when we look at dogs, and that's why I've been supporting hemp oil, and I've been supporting phytoplankton, and I've been supporting other methods of getting full nutrition into a dog or a cat, as far as our omegas and our fats go.
Sustainable methods.
Sustainable methods, exactly. And also methods that, in my opinion, maybe not phytoplankton, so that's valid, but more like, where were dogs eating? Like, when you look at physiology, and we're all in the same boat, so everybody is saying dogs have not evolved to the point where they thrive on kibble, right? So if that's the case, then when we go back, why aren't they getting, why do we even need to add this stuff? Because in the wild, they're not eating phytoplankton, they're not eating fish oil, they're not eating fish, they're not, at least not on a regular basis. What are they eating? They're eating animals, they're eating fats, they're eating the nutrients that come from the animals, they're grazing on grasses, they're eating They've seen wolves chewing on specific plants that actually have plant omegas. So what's happened between then and now that this conversion rate is so low? And I think you hit the nail right on the head in one aspect, is that the microbiome, which has been, a major passion and a source of research for me for 15 years, it's about synthesis. It's not even about conversion. Even for me, it is about conversion when you look at it from a science-based point of view. It's more of a synthesis, a cellular synthesis. So it's like companion planting with plants. We know that if a plant is planted with another plant, the therapeutic value of, let's say, milk thistle planted with its companion plant, or more wild crafted, is
it's just me.
way, 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 way higher, right? The therapeutic value. So when we got to look at what they're eating in general. So it's not just the oil. It's like you said, it's the species appropriate diet, and in that situation, how it synthesizes with the rest of the cellular makeup to then create the end result. So when we talk about microbiome, we know 1,000% that it has everything to do with the synthesis of the ability of nutrient value and the absorption rate of the nutrient value. So we can be adding stuff, but what are they actually absorbing? So when you look at kibble-fed dogs and you look at that amazing, preliminary research that Holly and Dr. Patton's doing, it's they've done it with people. They know that microbiome is very much what supports the body into producing a lot of our vitamins and minerals and nutrients that we are all of our micronutrients, right? So the same holds true with fat. So when you said about Mother Nature, I also agree with that, because I think that when you look at even the fats, right? So when we're looking at fat from a carnivore would be getting, so we're looking at fat from a grass-fed cow compared to a factory farm cow that's fed grains. There's so much to this that, the mineral depletion, like that's what I'm going to be talking about in raw Roundup, is even just mineral depletion in our soil, right? So I think that there is such a large component, but I believe at the very end of what you said, is a dog that's fed species-oriented food, species-specific food, should be able to function in such a way that their physiology and the way that their cellular mechanism works and the way their absorption rate works when it has a healthy microbiome, in my opinion, should not need fish oil.
Yeah.
It's not natural. It's not, but it's not easy to say, do this or don't do this. It's just so not black and white.
And
so
on the topic of minerals, it's deficient in minerals as well compared to whole fish and some plant oils.
It is. And then hence the phytoplankton, right? Yeah. Like I feel like, and I'm all about science, and I'm in my second phase of doing a big research on the cellular mechanism of this type of stuff, and how it synthesizes, and how we're not even studying it the way we actually need to study it. Like even our studies that we're doing right now, like, or would be like 10 years ago, what would we be talking about DNA studies? Like look at the differences of how we actually study that now compared to even 10 years ago. Yeah. So it's not, I feel in my heart, I feel like we also have to be able to observe and not to just read, right? So observation is something that I find we either do it too much, like me, like I'm observed, I have like a microscope on my animals constantly, or, which I don't think is healthy, or we do the opposite, where we are feeding our dogs and working with our dogs in a way that we are reading, right? and we're not visually looking. So when you look at the study and you look at what does it mean when the inflammatory markers are down, how do we see that, right? We see it in, you know, hair coat, we see it in energy, we see it in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So animals, and I always talk about empirical proof, right? Like animals are because of their fast cellular turnover, it's pretty fast to see what they're thriving on and what they're not thriving on. So I do believe that when we're looking at a species-oriented diet and we're balancing it and we're really clearly looking at whole food nutrition compared to processed nutrition, I do believe that they have the ability to produce, absorb, whatever you want to call it, the types of fats that they need to thrive. That's honestly what I feel like. But I also feel like there's lots more research to be done, like what's being done with Holly. There's a lot of more research to be done about the actual what's in the cells, not just what's in the you know what's really interesting is that when you even look at phytoplankton and you look at the fats, right? I'll just use this as an example. The amount of types of fats that are in phytoplankton, people don't even know what they are yet.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists look at them and they're like, they're these fats that haven't even been examined, right? So what are in those fats? And why are those fats in there? And what are they doing to produce omega-3s in fish? It's really fascinating, and I love when stuff like this happens because it keeps everybody thinking. So what my experience is in my clinic and with my own life and my animals is the closer to real you can get, the closer to species oriented you should do. And we have to look at the planet, right? Because when you talk about Mother Nature talking to us and Mother Nature guiding us or Mother Nature knowing what's best, I 1000% agree with you. I could not agree with you more. And there's something very, very, very wrong going on now in the ocean. Very wrong. And if we don't smarten up, there's not going to be any fish in 10 to 40 years to give anybody fish oil.
Yeah.
Like for real, I'm being dead serious.
Yeah.
So I feel like that problem forces someone like me to create or find the solution of what's actually underneath that.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, personally, I don't feed fish oil, and I wouldn't. I feed as much, we talk about the bits, like stuff that's in fish or that we aren't getting in dog food, like as if I can get organs and I can get, eyeballs, and I know that sounds disgusting, but they're all different kinds of fats that they're lacking. So, and with hemp oil has a very distinct type of omega-3, not just regular omega-3. We're just hitting the tip of the iceberg with all of this, but ideally is, what are your dogs just more in the moment with your dogs and watch them. And if you can do it with people out there that are just sort of exploring natural things with dogs, and you're buying dry dog food or you're buying food, then I agree. Then fish oil is probably the way to go, but not fish oil from Costco. Not fish oil that's going to cause more of an inflammatory response. You need to do stuff like krill that's ethically sourced and in a really clean oil, right? But if you're feeding raw and you're paying attention to your microbiome, which is what's going to synthesize anything that goes into every single solitary thing that goes in your dog's body, then I don't support it. But I'm not saying that it's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have
Yeah, do some questions here.
I believe so. Let me just have a look here.
White Leg's getting antsy. She's like, hey, let's take some questions.
Yeah, sure. Alex has been keeping tabs on them for us. Just a sec here.
Okay. It's question time, Julie. Do you have a couple more minutes to spend with us?
I do.
Okay.
My feet are freezing, but I have hot drink. And I have to put my money where my mouth is, so I turned my truck off so I wouldn't into the pretty forest that I'm in. So now I'm like freezing my butt off. My teeth aren't working. It's like,
Yeah. But it's true. I think that when you feed unnatural food, you're always going to get unnatural outcomes. And you just find yourself in the position of, oh, now I have to patch this. Oh, now I have to fix this. And it's endless. And if you can start where you want to end and try to get, the food into your dog that's as close to what Mother Nature wants your dog to eat, which means hopefully it's grass-fed as much as possible, and it's got more of the omega-3s in it. You're better off.
And I think, like when we look at like thyroid testing, right? When I started all of this, all we ever did was T4s and TSHs. And now we know that for years and years and years, that was completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
Until Jean Dawes created the thyroid panel, and then wound up diagnosing all these dogs with hypothyroid because the tests weren't right. Yeah. We're so smart, but we're really so juvenile.